This is Modern Naya Zoo. And it is a deck that I have some experience with. I've played it at a Pro Tour, and it's one of the more popular aggressive decks in Modern. I like the deck a lot. It's got a very low mana curve. I like to be aggressive in this format, and it's in many ways similar to Burn as well. So let's go over some of the card choices here. We're playing 20 lands. There's one in particular that you may want to take note of. That's the Dryad Arbor. And it may seem weird to play Dryad Arbor in an aggressive deck, but it actually works really well here. There's 8 green fetch lands in the deck, so all of those fetch lands can search for the Dryad Arbor. And it can act as a creature. And for a variety of reasons, along with Reckless Bushwhacker, along with the Tarka's command, having that extra creature in play can be very important. And this deck does not want to flood, so it gives you something to do with an excess land that you have left over. So there's a lot of 1-mana cards in the deck, because the deck is basically hopes to come out of the gates faster than the opponent. If you're coming out of the gates slower than your opponent, you're doing something wrong and you're very likely to lose the game. So this deck is just trying to drop all of its cards on the table as fast as possible and then play from there. Sometimes it does involve some top decking, and you always want to start the game with a 1-drop creature. So we've got Wild Nacatl. Of course, it's our best 1-drop, 1-mana 3/3. We've got a bunch of essentially planes in our deck, being Sacred Foundry and Temple Garden, that we can search for with any of our fetch lands. And so basically, we're going to most of the time have Wild Nacatl as a 3/3, which is great. 1-mana 3/3. Experiment 1 is the 1-drop that we want to play immediately, because we want to then play the rest of our creatures after it and allow the Experiment 1 to get bigger. And so these are our green 1-drops, and then we've also got 8 red 1-drops. So we've got 4 Goblin Guides. Goblin Guides should need no introduction. And 4 Curd Apes. So all of the 1-drops are very powerful. They're all capable of being 2 power threats. Some of them, like the Experiment 1s and Wild Nacatl, can be even 3 power threats. Experiment 1 can become a 4 or even 5 power creature. So yeah, these cards may only cost 1 mana, but they have a significant impact on the game. And looking at the rest of the creature base here, Burning Tree Emissary is basically the card you want to be playing on turn 2 a lot of the time, and it enables you to start on one of your 1-drops, then play Burning Tree, and play 2 more 1-drops. You basically have a ton of explosive draws involving Burning Tree Emissary. It's absolutely one of the most important pieces of this deck. 4 copies of Tarmogoyf. Tarmogoyf is just the best creature in Modern. It's also a 2-drop, so it's the best 2-drop that you can play off Burning Tree without having a double 1-drop situation. So Tarmogoyf, sometimes this deck actually can grind out the opponent with Tarmogoyfs. And the newest creature to this deck is Reckless Bushwhacker. So we've seen this card see some play in Standard. It's now seeing play in this deck in Modern. And playing Burning Tree Emissary into a Reckless Bushwhacker is a wicked combination. And it also helps with a Dryad Arbor. Something like you have 3... On turn 3, you go, fetch my green fetch land for an Arbor. Then you go Burning Tree, Bushwhacker. Now you've got 3 new creatures that have haste. I mean, it's absurd. It allows you to have very explosive draws. It also works great with devastating summons. and that's why there's one copy in the deck. So Devastating Summons is a card that does not see much play, but it allows you to basically have a huge attack for a turn. You can sack any number of lands, so normally it's around 3, maybe 4 lands you're sacrificing. And then you're getting the 2 elementals, and then along with a Bushwhacker, now all of a sudden they have haste, and your opponent's in just a terrible situation. So there is one copy of Devastating Summons. Clearly you never really want to draw 2 copies, so I like the 1. There's also one copy of Forked Bolt, which I also had in my version at the Pro Tour, and it's just nice against the small creature decks. Sometimes you'll board it out, and then of course there's 4 Lightning Bolts. The deck is just playing tons of good cards, all of the best cheap spells you can play in these colors. Path to Exile, Lightning Bolt. Path to Exile is actually notably the only actual white card in the main deck. So the deck is more green and red focused, but it's a Naya deck. So Path to Exile is just a premium removal spell, and then we've also got Atarka's Command. So it's hard for the opponent to play around everything. Atarka's Command is nice against a variety in a variety of situations. Sometimes you can stop your opponent from gaining life, but more often than not, you just have a bunch of Curd Apes and Goblin Guides and Nakados and what have you, and pumping those creatures up, even just 1 more power, is going to make a big difference. So I like having 3 Atarka's Commands in the deck. So this is the main deck. There's not that many pieces I would recommend changing. I think it's pretty straightforward. The sideboard, there's a little bit of wiggle room here, but I like this list as of right now. The Grafdigger's Cages, we've seen Grafdigger's Cage see sideboard play in so many different decks, including this one. There's the Zoo deck, there's various Court of Call and Company decks, there's Dredge deck rather, so there's all of these different decks in the format where Grafdigger's Cage is good against. So any deck that is searching for creatures, any deck that has creatures coming into play from the graveyard, you want to have Grafdigger's Cage. Magma Spray is a nice utility spell. It's good against Kitchen Finks. It's good against any type of small creature deck. Path to Exile and Chain to the Rocks are basically your additional removal spells. Sometimes in the creature-on-creature matchups, you just want more removal, and this is what helps you get rid of their creatures, and then all of a sudden your little dorks, your opponent doesn't even have any blockers in play, and you can just remove them, and then you're off to the races. Even though Affinity is declining a little bit, there's still 2 Stony Silences in the board, and then the 3 Destructive Revelries are good against Affinity, but they're also good against a bunch of other decks. So if we're playing as Hexproof, Ad Nauseam, whatever it may be, Destructive Revelry is going to have a place, and it's one of the more versatile sideboard cards for the aggressive decks like this one. Deflecting Palm is one of my pet cards in any deck like this. It's great against Infect. It's great against any type of weird Gristlebrand deck. It's good against Hexproof. It's good against a lot of random decks you might play against. And then there's 2 copies of Molten Rain. I'll board these in against the black-green decks, but they're great against Tron. Anytime you play it on turn 3 on the play and your opponent doesn't have that much going on, it's just immediately ruins your opponent most of the time. So really like that card. This is my current list, and I've been pretty happy with it and pretty excited to battle with it.